Hi, and welcome to All Points Bulletin on therapycable.com, where we talk about hot and sometimes controversial issues that are facing our communities. Today's episode, we will be talking to Lisa Martin, my guest, on surviving domestic violence. Lisa Martin grew up in Running Springs, California. She attended schools in Lake Arrowhead, and Lisa was married at the age of 19, has 3 grown boys now. But a little bit about Lisa's background. Lisa, like I said, you were married very young. You have 3 boys. You were married for approximately 7 years before leaving your ex-husband, who was extremely abusive. And when you left, you moved back home with your parents, and your children, I believe, were 7, 4, and 2 at the time when you left.
Yes.
So again, Lisa, thank you. And I know that, our asking you to come and share your story is not only extremely personal, but it's somewhat hard to tell as well. So thank you
for having me.
And just before we start, one of the things I would like to share as well is that we will be dedicating this episode to Jody Joyce and her 2 children, Jade and Jordan. Jody Joyce, unfortunately, was brutally stabbed by Lisa's ex-husband. She was married to Lisa's ex-husband several years after the 2 of you broke up, and he brutally murdered her on October 20th of last year, 2014, in front of Jade, who was 16 at the time, and Jordan, who was 11.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
So, I know we're going to go back and spend some time talking about what happened, but I just want to talk a little bit about your relationship with your ex-husband and being married young and some of the things along the way, that the red flags, and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Okay.
So Lisa and I met at a training at Laura's house that was hosted by Marissa Presley, and a 40-hour training as a domestic violence victims advocate.
Right.
And Lisa had approached me after the training to share a little bit about her story. And I will tell you, as soon as I heard it, I knew it was something that really needed to be aired, so other people could kind of hear what happened to you. But the fact that you're not a victim, you're a survivor.
Yes.
So Lisa, I'm just going to take you a little bit through the journey. So you were married at 19. Tell me a little bit about your history. And again, I know age and being young had a factor to some of the red flags you may not have saw, but
Right.
Tell me a little bit about the beginning of your relationship.
At first, he was very charming and, kind of wowed me. And I guess I was just completely enamored by that. And being the fact that I was only 16 when we started dating, I just thought, wow, he likes me. This is pretty great. And that's what's so scary for, other teen girls. But for me, he kind of sucked me in, and pretty quickly he started showing, his true colors, verbal abuse and a little bit of physical abuse, but not too bad. And so, the longer I stayed with him, the more I thought, well, he'll get better, and little did I realize at that time that months would turn into years, and the end of the story is so tragic. But I didn't know how to combat any of his actions because I was raised in a very sheltered home. There was no violence in my home whatsoever. I mean, it was a very loving, respectful household. I never saw my father even raise his voice at my mom. So I'm sure they fought, but anyhow, so for me, it was a very new venture, and I kind of just sat back and sort of watched it all and took it all in. And then by the time I realized there were problems, I had 3 boys. So.
And again, you were not only married young, but you had your first child very young as well.
Yes. I was a senior in high school when I got pregnant with my oldest.
So and again, I know that there were several times where the abuse got so bad. Can you just kind of take us through a little bit of explaining some of the what had happened along the way?
Through the years, I dealt a lot with infidelity and drug use and dealing and, threats on my children's lives. So that was a daily occurrence. And the mental and verbal abuse was daily. The physical wasn't daily, but it was enough that.
Can you describe a little bit about the mental and emotional abuse?
He would definitely keep an eye on the budget, which I have no problem but I would have to account for every penny, and sometimes even laundry detergent was too much, and he would force me to show him receipts, and just a lot of making you feel like you're just really tiny, like you just I had no self-esteem. Everything that I said and did depended on his approval or disapproval, and so I was very not very outspoken, very quiet, and I couldn't even think for myself. I was very dependent on everything that he said and did. He just, he would just put me down, talk about, how I looked after I had kids, and
just a little bit of history of what that was like.
It's terrible. I mean, you have stretch marks. No other man will ever want you, so you better just, figure out how to be happy with me, because no man will want you with stretch marks, and you're used up. You don't cook well, you don't clean the house well, all of which wasn't true, but so it would just make me try harder to make sure that the meals were better and the house was cleaner, and I had to drop out of school a couple of different times, because he was threatened by me going to school and possibly meeting other men. Every time I would get a job, he would, it would last a little while, and then he would decide he'd had enough of my exposure to to society. And would
he force you to quit, or would he make it so impossible that you had to
both.
quit?
Sometimes he would just make it, well, somebody's got to watch these kids, and or just say, we don't need you to work, financially we'll be fine, and I want you to quit. And he was not afraid to tell me, I just don't want you working. I don't want you around the other men. I mean, he had no problem.
So it was a constant that you were cheating, or you were going to meet somebody else?
Constantly.
Okay. And I know that in your 7 years of marriage, that not only did the emotional abuse get worse, but the physical. And I know that you said you grew up being close to your family. How did they not know? How did people not see what was going on in your life?
That's a really good question. I was very good at hiding it and masking it. And whenever there was any signs of evidence of any abuse on me, it was never, at least for the first 5 or 6 years, it was always in places that could be hidden, never on my face or anything like that. And when it was, I just made sure to stay away.
So it was about places that you could wear clothing to cover up.
Yes. When I was, like the first year we were married, I ended up having a miscarriage because he kicked me in the stomach. And
wow.
So just things like that. He would throw keys in the snow so I couldn't find him because he didn't want me to leave the house, and just random things that and so all of those things I would make excuses for him. I would I told my mom that I dropped the keys in the snow, but I needed a ride. Could you please come and get me? And so just things like that. So they never knew they knew there were problems. They knew that we weren't a match made in heaven, and that there were some things not quite right, but they never knew how bad it was until he picked up the phone one night and said, "Art, come get your daughter. I think I killed her." Wow. So, it's one of the few times I'd ever seen my dad in tears. So, and he carried me out, and then he carried the baby out, and I could hear him fighting with him on the front porch before we left, and so. And I stayed with him for 2 years after that. So it's just the mental.
But at some point you had gone and asked for help. I believe you had talked about going to counseling.
We did. We went to counseling several times over the years. And, I felt really, I just felt so alone because no one supported my end. They always said, well, you really should, try harder in this. You've got an obligation to the marriage, and it's not right for him to hit you, or it's not right that, that he put you in that situation. But you really should, try harder. And he's willing to make this marriage work. You really need to give it, give it everything. And so.
And that was straight from a counselor that
yes,
you. Wow.
Yes. And in fact, one time he bragged to his firefighter buddies what he had done, and not one of them, had felt like they needed to step up or call him out on it. So I just, after the years of going through that, I felt like there's no one. I'm on my own. It's just me and my boys, and I need to figure this out. So.
But even religion, I mean, was there?
Yeah, our pastor of our church spoke to both of us about it and said, it's not right for you to be hitting her, but you've got to put more effort into it, Lisa. You've really got to try harder. And
wow.
I just felt, I really and truly thought that was the rest of my life.
How old were you at that point?
I was probably 24, maybe almost 25,
right,
with 3 kids already.
So you had gone to counseling, you had gone to your pastor, you had asked for help in different areas, and it was always that same.
It was always pretty much
Lisa,
the same
try
answer.
harder.
Yeah, and I mean, they would reprimand him a little bit. You really can't be, doing that. It's not. You can't hurt her. You can't. It's not healthy for the whole family. But that was it. There was never anything farther than that. So it was pretty scary.
So when your family finally, because you were with him for a little over 7 years, and you
right.
finally packed up your 3 boys and went back home, what was the reaction from your family?
They were horrified. I mean, my mom said to me, I don't know why you didn't come to us before, and here I am in a small town. One of the biggest reasons, I mean, my boys are 4th generation on the mountain, so my family name, I mean, a lot of people know us. And I didn't want, my parents were very loved and well respected in the community, and his family too. I mean, his family didn't live up there as long, but they made a name for themselves and everybody knew them. And so I just felt like it was the entire world against me, and I just was so alone. It was just a very, very lonely place to be.
So even though your boys were young when you left, what was their exposure? And I know that you had said before we had met that your oldest son probably witnessed the most. But what was that like?
I always tried to make sure that I mean, it's sometimes there's no getting around. They're there. They're in the middle of it. But I always tried to get away from them when I knew something was going to happen. And again, it wasn't always possible. But he would have been 5 or 6 when some of the worst part of our marriage took place. And he's never said that he remembers actual incidents, but he does have memories of his dad being very angry and just not a nice person. And but he, I told him that a couple times that I mean, when it was obvious that something happened, that I crashed on my mountain bike, which I got away with that because we all used to bike all over the mountains. And
so you had visible bruises that
yes.
you told your son that you had fallen?
He's wanting to know what happened. So I told him, I crashed on my mountain bike, and he was okay with that. Years later, when he realized what was going on, he was angry with me for lying to him. How could you do that? How could, you can't tell a 5-year-old that
Daddy's hitting
me.
me.
Your dad beat me, I mean, so.
So, again, I know that one of the remarkable things is you went back to school and you got your degree and kind of started rebuilding your life.
I did. I went back to school, which, my mom actually mentioned, when I was done with that, she said, that was the best money you ever spent. She said, no amount of counseling could have given you the confidence and, the new outlook on life. There's nothing you could have done, better for yourself than going back to school. So it was a pretty incredible time in my life for me. I felt very, I felt like I had a new lease on life. I mean, it kind of feels like you're in a cloud, like for years, like a never ending cloud just around your head. And so it's a pretty great feeling when you realize that you don't have to do that anymore.
So it's incredible how you were able to just rebuild your life, basically, is what it sounds like. But it took you getting away from, an abusive ex-husband that allowed you the freedom to rebuild who you were.
It did, yes, it did.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
We're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsors, and then we'll come back and hear a little bit more about Lisa Martin's story.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome back to All Points Bulletin on therapycable.com. So Lisa, I just want to bring us back, and I know that you had filled us in about the 7-year marriage that you had with your ex-husband and how abusive and how dependent you were on him, and the fact that you had to, pack up your 3 young boys and head back to your parents where your life restarted. How many times did you try to leave, and what was that process like?
It was very difficult. The first year we were married, I probably spent, it might be exaggerating saying that I spent at least one night a week the first year, but probably once or twice a month I ended up at my parents' house for a night or two. And
still not letting them know what was going on either, right?
Right. I mean, they knew that I, that we might have had an argument or something, but they had no idea to what extent.
Right.
But they probably in the 7 years that we were married, I probably tried to leave, I would say 7 or 8 times, and 3 times I stayed away. 2 times I stayed away for like 4 or 5 weeks, and then the last time was for good. So it's difficult. It's so much easier knowing that I have 3 kids to take, or back then it was easier knowing that I had 3 kids to take care of, and I had no education at that point. Besides a high school diploma, what do I have to offer for my kids? What am I going to do? And I can't stay with my parents forever, even though I knew they would have taken me in. It just didn't seem like the best option, and it was just easier staying with him. Leaving is much more difficult than there's so many scary things that come into play, and I just every time he promised to get better, and we'd work on it, and I thought this is where I need to be. I made a commitment, and I have 3 children, and this is the best place for all of us. So.
And not only that, it sounds like when you did actually go and ask, when you were in the position of being able to ask for help, you kind of hit a dead end, and people saying, Lisa, you need to try harder. Right. What he's doing, we agree, is not right, but what are you going to do to make things, better or make things work? And I mean, and again, going back to how young you were and lack of life experience, right. and I can only imagine, how hard that must have been to just even figure out your way out.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't realize, people at, 15 and 16 years old, they think they have it all figured out. Right. And, I was no different. And it took me years to realize that, life doesn't have to be that way. It took me a long time to admit that even that what I was experiencing was, in the category of domestic, violence. I didn't think it was as bad as somebody else's, so it probably wasn't domestic violence. I had no idea.
Right.
So
after you left, your ex-husband then started dating Jody, and right. Jody was also 16.
She was 16, yes. Jody and I were both 16 when we started dating him, which, years later when I would reflect back on it, it makes sense, because he really doesn't have a lot to offer anyone. So it's easier for him to go after. He preys on, younger women, younger girls that he can manipulate easier.
And you also said with the infidelity throughout your marriage, it was always younger.
Always younger. I would lay money on the fact that there were probably, many of them were underage. So, mm-hmm. It's just a crazy world. I don't know. It's sometimes it just blows my mind to think about it. Right. It's just very, very weird. But yeah, that was his MO, and he was very proud of the fact that he could pretty much get anyone he wanted, and So yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, I think he probably didn't count on one thing about Jody is she was very academically driven, and so she was in school for years, put herself through school, and I think that was very threatening for him because that's not how I was.
Right.
You know, I was okay with being the mother of his children and a stay-at-home wife and not having any goals or, you know, I mean, every time I had a goal, he reassured me that that's not what I needed to do, that my job was to take care of the kids. So, you know, I was pretty much, you know, conditioned to appreciate the life that I had. And I don't think he could do that with Jody. You know, once she got past the teenage years and started working on her career, there was no stopping her. And he, I think he was very threatened by that.
So she was married. I mean, not only did he start dating her when she was 16, I mean, she
Right.
was married shortly after that,
Very
correct?
shortly, yes, yes. And so, and she went to the Air Force and, you know, for 4 years or something like that. And then, you know, started going to school. And she was a year away from getting her PhD.
Wow.
So
they eventually had moved to Las Vegas.
Yes.
And Jody was also the director of safe and drug-free schools in Las Vegas
yeah,
Metro.
she was very, very well known and respected in her field.
Right.
So this was a huge blow to their community, you know, loss for their community. She was very well loved and respected.
So how did your relationship, and again, I mean, I know that, you know, obviously you shared custody, having your 3 boys, and then Jody and your ex-husband had, you know, Jade and Jordan.
Jade and Jordan. Right.
So now your boys have, you know, 2 half-siblings
Right.
that they have gotten close to and getting to know. So, I mean, and again, I know that you ended up having a relationship with Jody later on. Can you just talk a little bit about that and how that started?
We always had a relationship. I mean, she, you know, it wasn't always, you know, it wasn't always perfect. I mean, it's just one of those situations where, you know, there's not always, you know, it's not always perfect. But I always respected her and appreciated her. She took care of the boys. I mean, she was good to them. They loved her. And I knew that they were much better off with her caring for them than if it was just, you know, with their father. Excuse me. So she, you know, through the years, the boys kind of started as they would grow up, they didn't want to be there. Justin, my second one, kind of bounced back and forth. So he sort of struggles with all of this, but the other 2 pulled away, almost 100% just because the older they got, they realized, you know, this is not the kind of relationship I want. You know, it's one-sided and they didn't approve of his behavior.
Right.
And so, so they didn't spend a lot of time with Jade and Jordan, you know, the last several years, and sad for all of them, but they didn't spend a lot of time with Jody either the last several years. So last September, or actually last July, Jody had contacted me and, you know, wanted to talk about, she'd never asked me any details about when we were married. So we shared a lot of phone conversations and a lot of...
and this is July of last year,
right,
correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of phone conversations and you know, instant messages on different, you know, social media and things like that. And, you know, I was kind of helping her through and, you know, it was sort of a healing process for both of us. I mean, it felt really good to be able to kind of bounce things off of each other, and she's a good person. And so, you know, I felt like in time we would, you know, probably be friends. And I know she appreciated, you know, the fact that she could pick up the phone and call me.
Right. And not only did you guys have kids in common, but you also shared a very abusive relationship.
Right.
So, and again, I think that that's important to say too, that, I mean, you may not know exactly to what degree Jody's abuse was, but he was also extremely abusive to her as well.
Yeah, we shared very similar. I mean, you know, when I told her what happened, you know, with the stalking and the, you know, the threats and
that you were always cheating.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she just couldn't believe it, you know, and she just, you know, she was just shocked. And
was in her story was the same as yours?
It pretty much mirrored mine, with, you know, the exception. She says that he never hit her until last July, and she pressed charges immediately. So, you know, if that's, whether or not that's true, I'm not sure. Maybe he just, you know, felt like he couldn't do that with her.
Right.
But
and again,
you
don't
know,
forget too. I mean, you were married. I mean, that's a 20-year difference too.
It is.
And
It's a long time.
domestic violence laws had really started
Yes.
to change, and you know, so maybe that was some of
very,
his
very possible. You know, he might have been, you know, a little more cautious with her.
right.
So so we, you know, we had definitely had kind of sparked up a little bit of a relationship. So, in fact, the last conversation I had with her was,
And this is in October, correct?
yes, it was September actually.
Okay.
Well, the last phone conversation, we texted a lot and things like that, but the last actual phone conversation that I had, she had called and said, "It's final, the divorce is final, and we're good." And she said, you know, he agreed to sign the papers without a nasty, you know, divorce and court hearings and all of that. But part of the agreement was that he could stay in the home until January 2015.
Wow.
And so I said, "Oh gosh, you know, I'm really happy that it's done." But I said, "That's not a good idea. He won't be able to control his anger and his, you know, he's losing everything. He's losing. I mean, she supported him. He, you know, he really didn't have to work, and so." You know, he's losing control over her, and he's losing his whole world is, you know, crumbling. And I said, "You know, Jody, that's really not a good idea." And she said, "I know, I've thought about that, but, you know, maybe it'll be a good transition for the kids and help them, you know, to get used to it." So having that as a last conversation is pretty, it's one of those things where your words come back to haunt you, and it's pretty disturbing. It's very sad situation. So
in between that last conversation you had of September 2014, things obviously got worse between Jody and your ex-husband.
Yes. She said that they got along pretty well on a daily basis, but one morning, you know, whatever upset him, she couldn't find her keys to go to work, and he, you know, she knew that he had probably hidden them. And so I guess that started a fight between them, and he picked up a kitchen knife and went after her in front of both of the kids. So.
And Jade was 16 at the time?
Jade was 16. Jordan was 11. So it's tragic on so many levels. His actions have, you know, just, I mean, the ripple effects, the hurt and the destruction are endless. I mean, it's just incredible.
And not only to, and not to minimize, I mean, obviously what Jade and Jordan have been through is just so unfair on so many levels, but it also had such an impact on your three boys too.
It had a huge impact. I mean,
and they're grown with their own children now.
Yeah, watching them navigate all of this, I'm proud beyond words, watching how they've handled all of it. But it's, you know, I mean, still, you know, like my oldest will say to me, you know, just out of the blue, I still can't believe what our life is all about now, you know? You know, the one positive thing is that we've become very close with Jade and Jordan. I mean, they're pretty much a part of my family. I mean, I you know, they'll be a part of my family for as long as they want to be. And the boys, it's given them an opportunity to get, you know, to reconnect with, you know, their younger brother and sister. So that's you know, that's a happy part, a plus part. I mean, if there is one, I mean, they're incredible kids.
Right.
I mean, they're amazing. Jody did an amazing job raising those kids.
Right.
They're well-rounded and, you know, confident kids and smart. So.
And I think that was the most amazing point of my meeting you was how you described your now relationship with your abusive ex-husband's younger kids, and just how you describe them. I'm telling you, it really, what an amazing story that you have, you know, just found such a relationship with two kids who really need, you know, someone to look up to.
Well,
and not only that, you have 4 boys now.
I do.
So
I do.
Can only imagine what Jade is like in your life.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Yeah, it's kind of fun having her around. She's a funny girl, and I appreciate her relationship, definitely. But yes, I do have, I have an amazing husband that probably the boys and I would not have the support. I have no doubt that we wouldn't have the support that we have without him. I mean, my husband is absolutely incredible. He's patient.
I met him
and
too.
kind,
He's
a
pretty
good
amazing
guy.
man.
Yeah.
Yes, I
and,
agree.
And so and Cody is our youngest, and he's pretty incredible too. But this has been pretty tough on him. Some pretty tough life lessons, learning things that he probably wouldn't otherwise hear if this hadn't taken place. So I mean, he's never experienced anything like that. So it's kind of a brutal awakening for him too. So it's affected a lot of people.
So what made you want to tell your story? I know that originally when after what happened with Jody, it kind of prompted you to become a domestic violence advocate.
What happened? I'm not very comfortable with public speaking, and so at all, actually. I think I'd rather have a root canal, but the homicide detectives that I've been talking with all of this time, and
in preparation for the court trial.
Right.
Okay.
And we have a neighbor that's a district attorney, and she, between the three of them, they kept, prompting and, encouraging, you really need to share your story. You could really do some good. And I'm like, no, that's, I one-on-one, I'd probably be okay, but that's not for me, And so then, as time went on, I thought, if I could even help one person,
right,
be there for one person, maybe I should consider it. And, there's, the law is that you can't do any of that if you don't take the domestic violence class. So that's how I met Marissa and took Laura's house, the class. And
which as I spoke, as I was a guest speaker there, I've also attended that 40-hour training.
Yeah, it's
and
amazing.
It's intense, it's amazing, it's powerful,
it's life-changing. It is life-changing. It was it definitely forced me to deal with things that I'd buried long ago. And so I decided, whatever I can do, I don't know if I'll do it well, but I'm willing to try. So so that's kind of how I got started.
Excellent. So. Lisa, I can't thank you enough. And what an amazing, strong human being you are. And the fact that you have really stepped up and just been a mentor to both Jade and Jordan, and have just been a strong influence, I'm sure, on the boys in your life. You're amazing. And
thank you.
Seriously, I can't thank you enough. I would, again, like to dedicate our episode to Jody, Jade, and Jordan, and just the amazing people that I know that how you describe them, that the two of them will become. And, if there's any way, and again, I feel like I know both Jade and Jordan just from our conversations, and God, they're just two resilient kids, and
amazing.
I just really wish your family the best of luck.
Thank
and
you.
Somehow I think that this episode will reach some people and hopefully spark maybe a different career choice for you as well.
Maybe so. You never know.
Again, I think life puts certain things in our way to help or navigate to who we are.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you
for
again.
having
I
me.
appreciate it. Again, thank you again for watching All Points Bulletin on therapygable.com.